Welcome to Mystic Realms Recap. Please like, share, and subscribe. Enjoy today's episode.
After leaving Earth, Lux returned to Hestia and found Aurora seated on a comfortable couch, eating popcorn with the beautiful halfling, Arenice. NOV Rapture marked the initial hosting of this chapter on NOV LSSEN. She was one of William's wives, and her hobby was watching soap operas, adaptations, as well as anime on Netflix. Having found a watching buddy, Arenice was very sad when Aurora bid her farewell. However, Aurora promised that after they finished dealing with the problems in their world, she would visit Hestia so that they could finish the rest of the halfling's recommendations. Aurora was also quite sad that she only managed to watch half of the show called Squirt Game, where people cleared life and death trials in order to live another day and earn millions of money. "I'll be waiting for you," Arenice said as she held Aurora's hand. "Promise me that you'll be safe, okay?" "I will be safe," Aurora replied and hugged her newfound friend. "Lux will protect me." Arenice hugged her friend tightly for a few seconds before reluctantly taking a step back. "I'm sure he will protect you, especially after everything he has gone through in order to reunite with you." Arenice smiled. "Both of you be safe. I will be waiting for your triumphant return." "Thank you, Arenice," Lux said. "Let's go, Aurora." Aurora nodded, and the two of them held hands before leaving the Ainsworth Royal Palace. James was already waiting for them outside, and as soon as he saw the two teenagers, he climbed on top of his eight-legged horse and reached out to help Lux and Aurora mount Sleipnir's back. "Are both of you ready?" James asked. "Yes." James then patted the neck of his trusty steed, signaling to Sleipnir that it was time to leave. The eight-legged horse then ran full throttle before it gradually rose to the sky, moving at great speeds. Soon, they broke past through the atmosphere of the world of Hestia and traveled through outer space. Sleipnir's speed further increased, and before long, Lux and Aurora found themselves traveling in a familiar tunnel, where the lights of the stars sped past them. Sleipnir ventured forward, closing the distance between them and the world of Elysium, which was about to enter a critical stage in the war against the Outer God and his abyssal army. Western regions of Elysium. "The time has finally come," Nyarlathotep declared as he stood amid his abyssal legion. "It's time to make these mortals understand that they never stood a fighting chance against me." The Outer God looked at the floating islands and flying ships of the Alliance in the distance with disdain. After nearly 2 weeks of hit-and-run battles, he now stood in his last stronghold, ready to fight the Alliance in a bloody battle. King Azza, Kyoza, Lady Augustina, the Beast King, and the leaders of the various factions of the Alliance stared at the sea of abyssal creatures that spanned across the horizon. They were like a black tide ready to swallow the world, and the majority of them were alien-looking abominations that had turned golden in color. "By the gods, I think there are nearly 1 billion of those vile things under Nyarlathotep's control," the Beast King grimaced. "Do you think?" The Beast King wasn't able to finish his question when the sovereign of Memento Mori cut him off. "During our journey, we haven't seen a single human corpse in or near the fallen kingdoms and empires that we visited," the old man said. "I believe that those golden abominations are born from the dead bodies of people. I am a necromancer, and I have committed many vile acts in my lifetime, but I have never done something to this extent. I'm sure my other comrades will agree that seeing this scene makes us feel inferior as necromancers." "You mean, you would have done such a thing if given the chance?" the founder of the Divine Army sneered. "I will not say that the possibility doesn't exist," the sovereign of Memento Mori replied. "But I'd rather choose to raise the dead from the cemeteries and ancient battlefields than to kill millions of people without a proper reason." "So, can your undead legion deal with these small fries?" the founder of the Divine Army asked. The sovereign smiled. "Of course. Let us handle the small fries. You can go aim for the Outer God's neck if you're that capable." The founder of the Divine Army frowned but no longer said anything. Truth be told, he had tried to contact the sovereign of their organization many times to ask that he send the newly created apostles over in order to fight against the abyss. However, the only reply he received from the other side was the words, "The apostles are still not ready. I need more time." Even a few hours ago, he had gotten the same reply from the sovereign, who had stayed behind in their underground base to continue the production of their apostles. "Everyone get ready to attack," King Azza shouted, and his orders spread far and wide, reaching all the floating islands and flying ships of the Alliance. As soon as the orders were given, the floating island of Heaven's Gate unleashed an opening barrage of blast bombs that rained down on the Abyssal army like a carpet of destruction. By now, Nyarlathotep had already figured out the range of the floating island's bombardment, as well as the weapons it employed in battle. With a wave of his hand, a purple barrier rose up to shield his forces from the bombardment of Heaven's Gate. When the first barrage ended, underneath the Alliance's formation, countless giant black tentacles rose up from the ground, ready to engage them in combat. The Alliance had seen these tentacles many times over the past few weeks of battle. Just like how Nyarlathotep knew the Alliance's abilities, the latter also knew the tricks that he was employing. In simple terms, both sides had already gotten used to each other's fighting style and had already developed countermeasures for each. The moment the black tentacles appeared, the dragons, the dragonborns, as well as anyone who had the ability to fight while flying in the sky, attacked the giant tentacles that were right under their noses. While this was happening, Nyarlathotep's abyssal army surged forward, marking the start of the final battle between the Outer God and the members of the Alliance. "All teams mobilize," Great General Garrett ordered. Soon, countless gyrocopters left the floating island of Edea and joined the dragons in fighting against the giant black tentacles and the abyssal monsters that they were hiding inside their bodies. Countless flying abyssal creatures covered the sunlight, turning day into night, and the sounds of explosions reverberated across the entire battlefield as everyone finally unleashed their trump cards, determined to exterminate as many enemies as they could. Both sides were now out for blood, and blood flowed like rivers as the battlefield were littered with corpses. However, these corpses would either rise again as zombies or golden abominations who continued to fight, even though the owners of those bodies were no longer present. The Abyssal Lords all attacked in full force, knowing that this time, there was no turning back. The Supremes also felt that this was the final battle, so they didn't hold back and engaged the Abyssal Lords in a battle to the death. Dark clouds covered the sky as thunder and lightning boomed in the heavens. The roars of countless monsters, humans, beastkins, dwarves, elves, halflings, gnomes, and all the other races of Elysium mingled with each other, creating a chaotic symphony of death and destruction. All this time, Nyarlathotep only watched the battle from afar as it commanded its forces to fight to the death. Cephas and Gerhardt fought side by side in the sky as they dealt with an Empyrean-ranked abyssal wyvern that had almost destroyed a gnome flying battleship. After successfully killing the Empyrean-ranked wyvern, it was converted into an undead wyvern to fight for their side. Hundreds of bone dragons unleashed their dragon breaths at the approaching abyssal army, incinerating those who were not strong enough to resist their draconic might. Suddenly, something unexpected happened. A golden abomination extended its tentacle to grab another one of its kind. A second later, it hurled its comrade towards one of the bone dragons in the sky. When the abomination lashed its body successfully onto the bone dragon's body, it detonated itself, sending an explosion that not only destroyed the bone dragon but also damaged the nearby flying ships that were near its blast radius. "And no," the founder muttered, "it cannot be." As someone who had used the power of the golden scales in the past, he was very familiar with the leftover divinity that it unleashed the moment one of their apostles attempted a suicide attack. "Are you there?" the founder asked right after activating the artifact that would allow him to contact the sovereign of the divine army that was back at their underground headquarters. "I guess the cat is out of the bag now, eh?" The founder of the divine army heard the outer god's teasing voice loud and clear from the artifact that he was holding in the palm of his hand. "How long have you had the golden scales?" the founder asked. "You're quite quick on the uptake," Nyarlathotep replied. "To answer your question, I gained this artifact nearly 2 weeks ago. Also, don't bother asking if your sovereign survived. He's among those golden abominations that are swarming your army right now. Who knows? The one that might attack you next might be him." "Bastard!" The founder of the divine army roared out of anger and frustration. He had already been feeling that something had gone terribly wrong a week ago, and he couldn't easily accept it now that it was confirmed. Nyarlathotep's laughter spread through the artifact in the founder's hand, making him crush it out of anger. After regaining his composure, he warned the other leaders that his people had been compromised and had been transformed into the golden abominations they were fighting against. Soon, more explosions shook the surroundings as dozens of golden abominations detonated themselves, destroying the bone dragons, killing dragons, as well as the flying ships in the surroundings. They didn't even care if they detonated in the places where their allies were fighting against the members of the alliance. This caused massive deaths on both sides, but Nyarlathotep didn't care like always. For it, the Abyssal Lords, the Abyssal Monsters, and the Golden Abominations were merely tools to be used to achieve the thing it wanted to achieve. Suddenly, a giant crystal dragon and a giant golden dragon appeared on the battlefield, whose ranks had shot up to the peak of the demigod rank. They were none other than Kyoza and King Azza, who had taken on their dragon forms in order to take out the outer god personally. It looks like they no longer want to play. Nyarlathotep sneered. Fine, let's see what the two of you can do. The outer god unleashed its full powers and grew a pair of black wings on its back. Nyarlathotep was already hideous and vile-looking. With the wings behind its back, it was like a flying monster that had come out of a horror movie. With an arrogant laugh that echoed across the entire battlefield, Nyarlathotep faced off against the two dragons, who stood at the apex of Elysium. Kyoza unleashed a crystal breath, while King Azza complemented it with a lightning breath. The two powerful breath attacks flew toward the outer god, but the latter only looked at them in contempt before raising the black scale and summoning its guardian to fight. A giant black statue emerged from the ground and raised its shield to block the two breath attacks that were aimed at its master. The attacks made the giant statue take a few steps back, but after getting a firm foothold, it managed to stand against the breath attacks of two of the strongest beings in Elysium. Nyarlathotep then unleashed countless dark rays at the two giant dragons, forcing them to evade. Kyoza and King Azza didn't dare to meet the outer god's attacks head-on, for it was an entity whom they had no idea what its attacks could do. The giant black statue grew bigger until it became as big as Lux's Deus Gigantia. What's wrong? Nyarlathotep asked as it landed on the shoulder of the black giant in a teasing tone. Is that all you've got? Kyoza and King Azza exchanged a glance and nodded their heads at the same time. The two dragons then flew high in the sky, reaching thousands of meters in the air. Nyarlathotep frowned because he had no idea what the two planned to do. However, a moment later, countless meteors, which were the size of a truck, descended upon the Abyssal army and turned the rear of their formation into a hellish landscape that reaped the lives of countless golden abominations, as well as the lives of countless abyssal monsters. Well played. Nyarlathotep had to admit that the two Dragon Kings were competent enough to lead the alliance to fight against it. However, this was still not enough to faze it. The giant black statue then raised its sword before unleashing a sword slash toward the floating islands, who were at the front of the alliance's battle formation. A giant black crescent blade emerged from its sword, slicing one of the floating islands of Karshvar Draconis in half, as well as the other ships that were right behind it. The crescent blade flew dangerously close to the floating island of Edea, where the guild headquarters of Heaven's Gate was located. Loud explosions reverberated in the surroundings as one of the floating island of Karshvar Draconis fell to the ground. The other flying ships that were hit by the attack earlier exploded mid-air, causing damage to the other flying ships that were adjacent to them. Nyarlathotep sneered and ordered the giant black statue to unleash another sword slash, which was meant to obliterate another large chunk of the Alliance's forces. The giant statue obeyed, and another black crescent blade flew toward the battle formation of the Alliance, not caring whether it hit even its allies. A loud draconic roar reached everyone's ears as Kyoza dived down from the sky and erected a crystal barrier, stopping the giant statue's attack. At the same time that this happened, a lightning breath descended from the sky and attacked the outer god directly. Unfortunately, the giant black statue blocked the attack with a round shield that had materialized in its left hand. "You have to do better than that, Dragon King," Nyarlathotep said in a teasing tone as the giant black statue started to charge towards the formation of the alliance with its shield raised in front of it. Clearly, it was planning to use its shield to charge through the enemies that were right in front of it, crushing them through brute force. Kyoza once again raised a crystal barrier in an attempt to block the giant's charge, but to his surprise, his crystal barrier shattered mere seconds after the shield collided with it. Although the speed of the giant statue's charge slowed down a bit, it still had enough momentum to slam its shield against the crystal dragon and send him flying. "My king!" Lady Augustina shouted after seeing Kyoza crash toward the ground, thousands of meters away from the formation of the alliance. With nothing stopping its way, Nyarlathotep laughed out loud as the black giant statue once again charged forward, intending to destroy everything in its path, not caring whether they were friend or foes. At that exact moment, a beam of light hit the side of the giant black statue and pushed it to the side, stopping its deathly charge toward the member of the alliance. Nyarlathotep glared hatefully in the distance and saw a giant flying bone ship. However, it wasn't alone. Countless other flying ships with pirate flags fluttering in the breeze surrounded it like satellites ready to strike. "I'll sing you a song. It's the song of the sea," Eiko, who was in her fairy princess form, sang with a sneer on her adorable face. "I'll see you a song if you sing it with me." The pirates, who were now members of the Boom Boom pirate crew, all sang the chorus of the song, raising the morale of the alliance, who saw that reinforcements had arrived. "And it's row, me bully boys. We're in a hurry, boys. We got a long way to go. And we'll sing and we'll dance and bid farewell to chance. And it's row, me bully boys, row." The pirates of the Boom Boom pirate crew all moved toward the Abyssal Legion in order to help their allies in battle. Eiko and Poseidon faced Nyarlathotep and its giant black statue, making the outer god's smiling face disappear completely. Truth be told, it wasn't afraid of facing off against the entirety of the alliance. However, whenever it faced the baby slime, it always suffered a loss, making it treat the fairy princess seriously. "So, you've finally come," Nyarlathotep said. "I have been expecting you." Eiko didn't say anything and simply ordered Poseidon to unleash another beam attack at the black giant, who had lost its arm, which was holding the sword earlier. Nyarlathotep sneered as he cast a spell that he had prepared to counter Poseidon's deadly beam strike. Bending the space in front of it, a purple portal appeared and swallowed Poseidon's attack. When the last of its beam strike had faded, another portal appeared above Nyarlathotep, sending back the beam strike that it had absorbed earlier right towards the annoying fairy princess, who had gotten in his way one too many times already. "Come, see to," Eiko ordered. Suddenly, a gigantic figure appeared between the bone ship and the beam attack that Nyarlathotep had returned toward Poseidon. A loud explosion shook the entire battlefield as the beam attack collided with something, sending a powerful shock wave that blew everything within 500 meters around Poseidon away. A dust cloud covered everyone's vision, preventing them from seeing the outcome. Great General Garrett and Emma, who were on the floating island of Edea, couldn't help but feel anxious after seeing that Poseidon had taken a direct hit from its own beam attack. But, just as everyone thought that the bone ship had been destroyed, something stirred within the black smoke, making Nyarlathotep frown. A giant clawed hand swiped the dust cloud away, revealing a gigantic monster with a squid-like face and countless tentacles dangling from its face. It was Eiko's latest creation, C2, which was the shortened version of its original name, which was Cthulhu. A Cthulhu that is not dead, which can eternal lie, and with strange eons even death may die. One who dreams at the depths of the sea. Rating: SSR+++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++ strongest demigod of Elysium, world boss. Health / mana / strength, intelligence, vitality, agility, dexterity. Title: The one who wiped the dinosaurs out of the world. Note: you want stats and flavor text? I will give you stats and flavor text. With the order of its master, the giant monster of the deep, charged with a roar that shook the lands and the heavens. The strongest demigod of Elysium had finally appeared in the world, and, with its appearance, the outer god's face became as dark as the night. With a single punch from C2, the giant black statue staggered backward. With another punch, it was sent flying for thousands of meters, alongside the demigod that stood on its shoulder. A different creature was supposed to be born from the bone cauldron that Eiko had summoned. With 10 demigod cores, a powerful monster was guaranteed to appear. But things changed when Nyarlathotep decided to seek out Eiko in order to steal the golden anchor from her hands. Unfortunately for the outer god, its plans were ruined when the demigods and calamity-ranked monsters of the sea all rose up to the surface and fought against it and the abyssal lords that it had brought along to hunt Eiko down. 10 of those abyssal lords died in that skirmish before the rest fled toward the portal in order to escape. Even Nyarlathotep's clone failed to escape that encounter and was vaporized by Poseidon's powerful beam attack. The bone cauldron then grabbed the bodies of the 10 abyssal lords, who still had their demigod cores. This development changed the nature of the creature it was forming, resulting in the birth of the strongest demigod that the world had ever seen. Regardless of what the giant black statue did, it was unable to compete with C2's raw strength and power. With each clash, parts of its body were destroyed, making it look extremely pitiful. The darkness in Nyarlathotep's face disappeared when he discovered something interesting within the giant, who had a squid-like face. Haha, what a stroke of luck! Nyarlathotep rejoiced after confirming that its guess was correct. Earlier, it had planned on escaping, but after confirming the composition of the giant monster was similar to, only being slightly inferior in strength when compared to Nyarlathotep's true body in the abyss, an idea popped inside its head. Many thought that the outer god's true body was in Elysium, but in truth, it was still in the abyss. Nyarlathotep was simply too strong to descend into Elysium, so it had to divide off a portion of its true body and lower its rank to the peak of the demigod rank. To further decrease its strength, allowing it to pass through the fabric of time and space, it split into clones, greatly reducing the pressure that it would receive the moment it stepped into the world of Elysium. The outer god's body back in the abyss was covered by a fleshy cocoon, allowing it to enter a state of hibernation, while its consciousness controlled its body and the clones it had created. This was the reason why Daniel was able to communicate with Nyarlathotep's consciousness even though the connection between the worlds had been cut off from each other. The moment C2 destroyed the giant black statue, it immediately lunged toward the giant monster and transformed into a black slime. Nyarlathotep then forcefully entered C2's mouth, catching the demigod by surprise. A moment later, it started to hold its head as if it was suffering from a painful headache. Black tentacles emerged from its body and lashed out to everything around it. Retreat. King Azza ordered with a grim expression on his face. Get as far away as you can now. Poseidon also backed away because it was feeling that something had gone terribly wrong with its comrade who had just defeated the giant black statue, who now lay on the ground in pieces. Eiko looked at her newest subordinate with a frown on her face. She also had a very bad feeling as C2 roared, making the sky and the land tremble due to its intensity. A minute later, the roaring stopped and was replaced by laughter. Ha 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 ha. C2 laughed. Good. This body is perfect. Thank you for giving me such a wonderful gift. The giant monster with a squid-like face then raised his hand, sending countless black tentacles flying toward Poseidon. Eiko, who realized that C2 had been taken over by Nyarlathotep, shouted a command. Stop, Eiko ordered. The tentacles that were about to attack Poseidon froze mid-air, stopping its attack completely. Seeing this, Nyarlathotep frowned. It seems that this body is still following her on an instinctual level, Nyarlathotep mused. It had just fused with C2's body, so it was understandable that it was still not fully under its control. This meant that staying wasn't an option since Eiko would still be able to control the vessel that it was currently possessing. No matter. This wasn't part of the original plan anyway. The demigod then retracted its tentacles and laughed a second time. Members of the Alliance, it was a pleasure toying with all of you, Nyarlathotep said. However, even if this gift that I have humbly received hadn't arrived, the ending would still have been the same. While all of you here thought that you were waging the last battle to rid your world from my influence, I can only say that all of you have been wrong this entire time. Another laugh escaped Nyarlathotep's face as he glanced at the two Dragon Kings, who were the leaders of the alliance. This whole battle was just a big distraction, acting as a smokescreen to prevent you from realizing my real goal in this world. It was never my goal to fight an all-out battle with all of you. No, this is just a farce that all of you decided to believe. Nyarlathotep then raised his hand, and the millions of golden abominations that were still alive on the battlefield all rose up and flew toward the giant monster with a squid-like face. I will now leave for the true battlefield that has been waiting for me, Nyarlathotep sneered. All of you can despair knowing that no matter what you do, you will be unable to arrive in time to do anything. After saying those words, Nyarlathotep disappeared, alongside his minions, leaving the Abyssal Lords and the demigods behind. A spore Frieden. The sky darkened, turning the day into night. A giant black dome encapsulated the entirety of the Elven Kingdom, as well as the refugees that had gathered to seek shelter from the abyss. Hirswitha's eyes widened in shock after sensing that a blockade had been erected around the Elven Kingdom, cutting off her connection with everyone outside of its range. Suddenly, a giant that was over 150 meters tall appeared outside the kingdom of the High Elves. Nyarlathotep then raised its hand, summoning the black scales and activating its powers. A metallic ring spread in the surroundings, making those who heard it feel their bodies weaken. Hirswitha's face paled when she noticed that her rank, which was a peak demigod, dropped to that of a peak calamity rank monster. The High Elven King's rank, which was a supreme, also fell to that of a saint, shocking him greatly. It was not only the two of them. Everyone, inside the black dome that Nyarlathotep had created, had their ranks decrease by one whole realm, making them shudder. Did you really believe that I had forgotten about the world tree? Nyarlathotep asked in a teasing tone. As long as it is destroyed, this entire world's strength will decrease drastically, making everyone drop a realm, just like what is happening to all of you. The outer god then chuckled as it waved its hand. Countless golden abominations appeared around him, who all shifted their attention towards the Elven Kingdom, which was said to have the strongest defense force protecting its territory. Now, those defenders had been stripped of the strength that allowed them to protect their domain, and with it, a tide of golden abominations charged towards the city with a maddened glint in their countless eyes. The Alliance, who was still in the western regions of Elysium, didn't know where Nyarlathotep had gone with the body of the giant that Eiko had summoned to help them fight earlier. King Azza and Kyoza both knew that they weren't a match for the creature earlier, and both of them now had grim expressions on their faces. A creature that was stronger than them as an ally was different from a creature that was stronger than them as their enemy. Also, it seemed that Nyarlathotep managed to take over the creature's consciousness, making it twice as dangerous. The mastermind of the war on Elysium might have left, but that didn't mean that the battle was over. Facing millions of abyssal monsters, the Alliance knew that they still had to fight. They couldn't let such a threat remain in their world. The Abyssal Lords, who had been left behind by Nyarlathotep, also understood that they were at the point of no return. Either they fought with everything they had in an attempt to survive, or they allowed themselves to die in the hands of the Alliance, whose numbers had grown significantly with the appearance of Eiko's Boom Boom pirates. While the battle was taking place, Eiko stood on top of Poseidon's deck with a frown on her face. She could still feel her connection with C2, and she could also vaguely pinpoint its general location. However, when the fairy princess realized where Nyarlathotep currently was, her expression immediately turned grim. "A spore Frieden," Eiko shouted. "I need to save Mama." Eiko immediately used her skill that would allow her to instantly teleport to Lux's or Iris location. However, after using the skill, nothing happened, which made her eyes widen in shock. In order to prevent any reinforcements from appearing in a spore Frieden, Nyarlathotep's clone had painstakingly created a wide-area magic circle under the earth, using the ley lines surrounding the Elven Kingdom to create a dome of darkness, which manifested the laws of the abyss inside it. In short, The elven kingdom of Aspor-Frieden had been temporarily turned into a pseudo-abyssal land, which was made possible by the power of Azathoth, who was still sleeping at the deepest layer of the abyss. This law prevented the laws of Elysium from interfering with what was happening inside. The Black Dome only allowed abyssal creatures to enter and exit its territory, preventing any kind of reinforcements coming from outside. Knowing what was at stake, Aiko teleported to the guild headquarters of Heaven's Gate and used its teleportation gate to teleport to the Finn Kingdom. He left Avery and Poseidon behind to help the Alliance clean up the abyssal monsters. Also, Aiko could summon them anytime, anywhere. Because of this, she solely focused on making her way toward the elven kingdom of Aspor-Frieden with the fastest speed she could muster. Aiko knew that it would still take her a day or two to arrive at her destination even with her full speed. She just hoped that when she arrived, her mama would still be safe from the outer god, who had taken over the strongest demigod in Elysium. Aspor-Frieden. Nyarlathotep watched as its army of golden abominations, which numbered in the tens of millions, swarmed toward the elven kingdom like a golden tide. The outer god had its arms crossed over its chest as it relished the desperation, horror, and disbelief that had taken over the hearts of everyone in the High Elven Kingdom. Defend the world tree with your lives, the High King of the Elves, Casimir Elfrieden, shouted. If we fall here, Elysium will fall after. No matter what happens, the world tree must survive. The High King knew that even if they managed to survive the wave of abominations that was coming their way, the moment Nyarlathotep made its move, everything would be over. However, the outer gods seemed to be content to watch the desperation on their faces, so it didn't make any move and simply allowed its subordinates to terrorize the non-combatants from the different races who had all gathered in Aspor-Frieden for protection. The safest place in the world turned into the most dangerous place in Elysium in a heartbeat. Hirswith commanded Jajatir, whose rank couldn't fall lower than the Calamity rank, using its powers to affect the enemies. However, there was one problem. Its powers to manipulate the feelings of others by charming them didn't work on the golden abominations, whose only reason for existence was death and destruction, and were protected by the divinity of one of the pillars of eternity. Its sibling, Lucien, who was also one of the 7 stars of calamity and was currently under Lorelei's control, howled and raised the morale of the protectors of the elven race. Lucien was a werewolf, standing 6 meters tall. Just like its brother, Jason Jatir, its rank couldn't go lower than the Calamity rank, making it among the top fighters that could defend the Elven Kingdom from the threat of the Golden Abominations. But that was it. It could only defend against them, but once Nyarlathotep moved, it would die just like everyone trapped inside the Black Dome, which made Aspor-Frieden look like the ruined kingdom of Zangrila before it was destroyed by the forces of the Abyss. Lucien, defend the people, Lorelei ordered, making the werewolf charge at the abominations that were only hundreds of meters away from the walls of the Elven Kingdom. Hirswith opened her wings and rose high above the city. She then summoned her Deus Gigantia, whose rank was that of a demigod. Seeing this, Nyarlathotep only sneered. It was confident that even if there was a demigod or two that would appear in the Elven Kingdom, it was still not enough to stop it from destroying it completely. Lucien then began its rampage and started to massacre the golden abominations that had scaled the walls of the city. The saints, who had now been degraded to high rankers, were also giving their all to defend against the unending tide of monsters that had started to slaughter their way towards the city. Suddenly, a golden abomination lunged at Lucien with its tentacles and countless teeth spread wide. At first, Lucien thought that it was just one of the many abominations in Nyarlathotep's army. But the moment they clashed, the beast of calamity was sent flying by one of its tentacles, crashing into the structures in the city. A chuckle escaped Nyarlathotep's lips because the one that attacked Lucien was the former sovereign of the divine army, who had been transformed into an abomination. The abomination had the strength of a demigod, which easily overpowered the calamity beast who had been weakened considerably by the laws of the abyss that permeated the entirety of the Elven Kingdom. Soon, cries of pain, horror, and despair reverberated in the surroundings. It didn't matter whether they were elves, dragonborns, dwarves, humans, beastkins, or one of the other races who had sought shelter within the elven kingdom of Asporfrieden. All of them suffered the same fate when the monsters, who looked like creatures that had stepped out of their most horrifying nightmares, started a killing spree, dyeing the streets of the ancient elven city with their blood. An hour after Nyarlathotep's abominations marched towards the city, a quarter of the elven kingdom had already fallen. Despite everyone's desperate attempts to defend the city and its people, they were simply too weakened to resist the unending wave of monsters who let out a creepy laugh every time they killed and ate someone. These synchronized laughter made the hearts of anyone who heard it shudder, further lowering the morale of the army. In the end, Nyarlathotep used its power to manipulate the dark emotions of everyone, causing them to enter a berserk state, not caring whether they attacked friend or foe. Fortunately, Jajatir was quick to counter Nyarlathotep's scheme, returning the sanity of the affected people. But in the end, that didn't change anything. Their weakened minds were unable to overcome the fear and despair that they were facing. Soon, these defenders started to run away from the front lines, causing a domino effect to happen. "I don't want to die," one of the elves shouted as he ran away with all of his might, causing his comrades to look at him in disbelief. But at the same time, they also understood that this battle was hopeless. Even if they fought, death would still claim them in the end. So why even bother fighting? This mentality gripped the soldiers, and one by one, they fled the battlefield, making the elven king shout in anger. However, no matter how loud King Casimir shouted, and no matter how much he tried to rally his people, once the fear had taken root in their hearts, there was no way to stop its growth. The Dragonborns, who had earlier helped in fighting against the Golden Abominations, returned to their floating islands in the hope that they could escape the death and destruction that was happening below them. There were still many people who hadn't left their homes, hoping beyond hope that the monsters wouldn't be able to find them. But this was just the foolishness of those who refused to look at reality. All throughout the streets of the city, countless elves, humans, and other races were running desperately to find a safe place to hide. Behind them, the Golden Abominations let out their eerie laughs as if they were enjoying this game of hide and seek while pushing their prey to the edge of despair, causing them to go crazy. One such abomination stripped the roof off an elven house and looked at the mother and child who were huddling together. "Mother, I'm scared," a 5-year-old girl cried in her mother's embrace. "It will be all right," the mother replied with tears streaming down her eyes as she held her child in a protective embrace. "We will always be together. Mother will always be with you." Using her body as a shield, the elf lady hugged her child tightly. Seeing that its prey didn't plan to escape, the Golden Abomination chuckled before opening its mouth to feast on fresh meat that was filled with the flavor of fear. But just as it was about to have its meal, something fell on top of its head and pierced its body with a black blade. A knight covered in black armor from head to foot twisted the sword in his hands before pulling it out of the Golden Abomination, who collapsed on the ground dead. The Black Knight's cape fluttered in the wind as it glanced at the mother and daughter pair. With a snap of its finger, 2 Doom Knight gangbangers rose up to carry the mother and child to safety. Suddenly, despite the loud cries of the desperate people and the laughter of the Golden Abominations, a firm and powerful voice reverberated in the surroundings, making Nyarlathotep look to the eastern side of the city. "I see things others can't." The blazing flames that were starting to ravage the city suddenly parted, revealing a young man who was walking as if he were just taking a casual stroll in the park. "Hear things others don't." The sound of war cries, curses, and dying screams spread across the entire city as the invaders mercilessly attacked anything and everything in their path. However, things started to stir from the shadows, and those who had fallen rose up again, not as abominations, but as greater undead who lunged at their killers and fought them tooth and nail. Shed tears when others won't, and fight when others don't. The sound of babies and children wailing in their mothers' arms could be heard everywhere as their parents desperately looked for a safe place to hide in order to save themselves from the one-sided massacre that was taking place around them. The monsters that were preying on these helpless people suddenly found themselves getting smashed by the spiked mace of one of the most grotesque-looking creatures in the world, and yet, also possessed one of the kindest hearts among the young man's subordinates. The same abomination sent flying earlier was turned to meet paste by a powerful smash from the four-armed hero, who had a permanent devilish sneer plastered on its face. "Have no fear," Pazuzu shouted with his spiked mace raised high. "I am here," All Might declared before charging at another monster and smashing it to oblivion. All around the city, countless undead warriors started to rise and engage the golden abominations who had been having the time of their lives earlier. Now, they faced not only the undead army that appeared out of nowhere, but also the people they had just killed. Their eyes glowed red with the color of vengeance. "I seek the monsters you fear the most," the half-elf said softly as he raised his hand, summoning countless undead to fight for his side. "I chase the nightmares that plague your sweetest dreams." Countless men and women ran past him as they engaged the monster army, which was now starting to feel a pressure rooted in their primal instinct. "I walk in the darkness so that others may see the light. I fight the creatures that threaten this world with all my might." A giant bone dragon landed in front of the half-elf and bowed its head in respect. The half-elf patted its head before jumping on its back, preparing to fight alongside his undead legion. With one mighty flap of his tattered wings, Avernus soared toward the sky and uttered a deafening roar of defiance. Lux stood straight on his back like a sword, looking at the countless monsters that were slowly advancing in his direction. "In a world where my existence has long been forgotten," the half-elf stated as his bone dragon opened his mouth to unleash its dragon breath. "I will let you know the error of the path you have trodden." Hearswith, who was desperately trying to fight against the unending tide of golden abominations, suddenly felt her rank return to the peak of the demigod rank. She was part of Lux's entourage, and his presence on the battlefield negated the effect of the abyssal laws that Nyarlathotep had set in place on all of his allies. Originally, his power alone was not enough to fight against one of the pillars of eternity that had the power to bend the laws of the world to its will. However, he was no longer the same as before. Not only had he stepped into the ranks of Supreme, he was now also in possession of one of the pillars of eternity. The golden locket that represented love was passed unto him by Aurora during their lovemaking. She deemed that Lux would be able to use it better than her, especially since he would be facing someone like Daniel in the future. The golden locket's specialty was protection. It could create powerful barriers that could withstand the strongest attacks once manifested. And right now, all of his subordinates' bodies were coated with a thin film of this barrier, negating the effects of the abyssal law that decreased their ranks by one realm. "Lux," Hearswith said as she looked at her grand disciple who was riding on top of Avernus, commanding his undead legion to fight the enemies that were aiming to destroy and kill the people who were important in his life. His lovers were currently sheltered within the world tree, so no matter what happened, he would prevent anyone and anything from harming them. "Grandmaster, I'll handle this fiend," Lux said, giving the beautiful elf a reassuring smile. "Please handle the small fries." "Understood," Hearswith replied. Now that her rank had returned to its peak, she unleashed the full might of her profession, which was Heaven's Necromancer, just like Lux. Under her influence, anyone that had died on the battlefield would automatically be resurrected into a greater undead, instead of turning into a golden abomination that served the outer god. Truth be told, she no longer needed to do this because Lux was already doing the same. However, having two necromancers working together was better than a necromancer fighting alone. "Interesting," Nyarlathotep said. "How did you manage to enter the barrier? I am certain that only abyssal creatures can pass through it." The answer to that is really simple. A carefree voice reached Nyarlathotep's ears, making it glance towards the northern side of the elven capital. There, it saw an old man seated on top of an eight-legged horse and casually throwing a silver spear from time to time, saving the fleeing elves from being killed by the golden abominations. "There is no place in the multiverse that I cannot go to," James stated. James didn't really want to interfere in this battle, but he just couldn't turn a blind eye to the lives that could be saved by him. Because of this, he would throw his spear, Gungnir, targeting the monsters who were pursuing the non-combatants in this battle. Nyarlathotep shrugged because it didn't think Lux or the old man were a threat to its existence. After all, it had taken over the body of the strongest demigod in Elysium, and even if all the supremes and demigods were to fight it, it would not fall. Yes, Nyarlathotep felt that it was invincible, and truly so. The vessel that it had taken over was perfect, and it gave it the strength that it needed to do what it wanted. Destroy the world tree and make everyone in Elysium despair. Avernus, support the others, Lux ordered. I'll take it from here. Are you sure? Avernus asked. He is strong. Don't worry, Lux replied as a pair of draconic wings opened behind his back. I can handle him. After saying those words, Lux flew towards the towering giant in the distance, who was looking at him as if he was an insignificant insect that it could crush any time. I grow tired of these games, Nyarlathotep declared. It's time for me to end this farce. From the beginning, the outer god could have destroyed the world tree and ended everything. But doing so was very boring. Because of this, it decided to make the people in the Elven Kingdom despair, as its countless golden abominations eat them to the last man, woman, and child. But, seeing the changes on the battlefield, Nyarlathotep knew that this was no longer possible. Several powerful beings were leading the fight against its minions, and all of them were of the demigod rank, with some even at the peak of the demigod rank. Hirswith, Avernus, All Might, were among those who stood out due to their incredible power and strength. However, there were others that were only a tier lower than them, which were Diablo, Ishtar, Pazuzu, Orion, Lazarus, Asmodeus, Bedivere, Zagan, Revan, King Leoric, Shax, Andrus, Draven, and Leonidas. They brought their 100,000 armies with them, which were now clashing headfirst with the golden abominations, who were suddenly finding themselves hard-pressed to continue pushing forward. The millions of undead, especially their leaders, seemed to be competing with each other on who would be able to kill more enemies. Within this chaotic battlefield, a black coffin could be seen darting left and right, unleashing tens of thousands of powerful beings, which it had devoured while Lux was sealed in the block of crystal. High-rankers, saints, calamities, and demigods. Blackfire had them all, and it was now unleashing these fiends into the world. Among Lux's subordinates, Blackfire was perhaps the most determined to collect the strongest creatures who would serve its master. And now, its hard work was paying off as its minions rampaged across the battlefield, turning any abomination they encountered into meat paste. With the powerhouses under his command joining the battle, Lux was certain that he didn't need to worry about anything else. All he needed to do was face the outer god, who had terrorized the entirety of Elysium and thought of mortals as nothing but tools to pass off its boredom. You said earlier that you seek the monsters that people fear the most, Nyarlathotep said in a teasing tone. Well, too bad. I am way out of your league, boy. After saying those words, Nyarlathotep pointed at the world tree in the distance and condensed a black orb of light on the tip of its finger. Next time you brag about something, make sure that you can back it up, Nyarlathotep stated. I am invincible. It then unleashed a dark beam of light towards the world tree, intending to destroy it with a single blow. A few seconds later, a powerful explosion shook the land, and a dense cloud of smoke spread in the surroundings. Nyarlathotep frowned because the outcome that he was expecting didn't happen. From within the dark smoke that rose up to the heavens, a pair of pale blue glowing orbs shone brightly. A moment later, a giant skeleton king emerged from it and laughed. Both of its arms were destroyed because it used its body to block Nyarlathotep's attack. Even so, it looked at the outer god in ridicule for boasting to be invincible. We'll see how invincible you really are. Lux sneered from inside the blue jewel of his Deus Gigantia. The destroyed arms of his skeleton king recovered in mere seconds, making Nyarlathotep scoff. It seems that you still think that you have what it takes to beat me, Nyarlathotep stated. I don't need to think, Lux replied as more arms emerged from the body of his skeleton king, which were holding different weapons in each hand. I will beat you. A red mist also appeared around its body, and the corpse god, who always protected Lux, manifested itself to merge with the skeleton king, raising its attack and defense to the next level. You will be a good warm-up before I fight against Daniel, Lux stated as the Skeleton King charged towards Nyarlathotep with its weapons ready to strike. "Keep your dreams and you sleep, boy," Nyarlathotep replied as it, too, charged at the Skeleton King, who was of the same size as it. "It's time to wake up to reality." A moment later, the two titans punched out, meeting each other's fists and officially starting the battle that would decide the fate of the world of Elysium. A single exchange was enough to create powerful shock waves that spread across the battlefield like a ripple, instantly annihilating countless golden abominations that were at the rear of the abyssal army. Several of the Doom Knight gangbangers, ancient zombies, ancient ghouls, and ancient mummies that had spawned thanks to the tombstones that Asmodeus had erected on the battlefield were shredded as well. The tombstones were also destroyed, but Asmodeus just shrugged and erected more. The undead warlocks, liches, sorcerers, mages that were under his command spawned more undead creatures, making it seem that the loss of their forces was not a big deal to them. In a battle of attrition, the undead would always win because they could spawn as many times as they could, ready to fight as if nothing had happened. The corpse god, who was fighting alongside the Skeleton King, used its shield to bash Nyarlathotep, pushing it away. It then fired its crossbows at the outer god, which the latter deflected with ease. The two once again engaged in close combat with Nyarlathotep and the Skeleton King, locking their hands at each other in order to overpower each other. In this regard, Nyarlathotep was stronger, but there was one problem. He only had 2 arms. While the two were locking hands, the corpse god took this opportunity to stab, slash, pierce, bash, and kick the outer god, who was forced to endure its attacks. "Are you tickling me?" Nyarlathotep sneered before kicking the Skeleton King away. "You have to do better than that if you want to hurt me, boy." Lux didn't reply and simply looked at the outer god in disdain. Tickling him? Lux would never do such a thing. Perhaps the outer god felt ticklish right now, but later on, this ticklish feeling would make it feel fear beyond words. The two once again clashed, and this time, Nyarlathotep's attacks became stronger and more aggressive. Each time one of its blows connected on the body of Lux's Deus Gigantia, part of its body would shatter. However, the destroyed parts would regenerate in mere seconds. During these moments, the corpse god's weapons would hit Nyarlathotep's body. Sparks would emerge during these collisions, but the body of Ako's strongest subordinate was very tough, and not even the corpse's god's weapons could draw its blood. Even so, Lux wasn't fazed and continued to fight Nyarlathotep in close combat. As the minutes passed, the more Nyarlathotep felt that something was wrong. It could feel that its reaction time had decreased by 1/4 of a second, which wasn't that much of a big deal. However, for someone at its level, it was able to observe these minuscule changes, making it wonder what was happening. "I need to end this battle now," Nyarlathotep thought as it increased the power of its blows, enough to shatter the body of the Skeleton King in front of it. The Skeleton King, who had no idea that the outer god was truly going for the kill, swung its scepter and met Nyarlathotep's right fist. Sparks emerged when the fist and the bone scepter collided, which caused a small crack to appear in the scepter's surface. This made Nyarlathotep's eyes widen in shock because the punch it just unleashed right now was enough to completely destroy its opponent, along with its weapon. But even with the strength it possessed, it only managed to put a small crack in the bone scepter, which regenerated itself after a few seconds. Due to its momentary confusion, Lux found an opening and ordered the Skeleton King to kick the outer god's chest and send it flying. This shift in battle confused Nyarlathotep very much. Earlier, even if the Skeleton King's attacks connected, they dealt no damage to its body whatsoever. But now, its opponent had managed to send it flying, which was supposed to be impossible, given the disparity in ranks. Nyarlathotep then gave its opponent a long and hard look and noticed something in the corner of its eye. Small golden orbs were flying towards the Skeleton King's body. The outer god followed where these small golden orbs were coming from and saw that it was coming from the Elven City, the floating islands, as well as the other settlements, where the non-combatants were gathered. "I see," Nyarlathotep said. "You are gathering the power of faith." It was the power that created miracles and gave people hope. Took you this long to find out? Lux sneered as he commanded the skeleton king to charge at the outer god, who now understood what was happening. Due to the half-elf standing up against the outer god who threatened to wipe out everyone in the kingdom of a Spore Frieden, the people there started to pray. They prayed that the giant skeleton king would be able to defeat the monster who planned to destroy the world. And their prayers manifested into golden orbs of light, which flew towards Deus Gigantia, giving it the strength it needed to fight against the outer god, who had called itself invincible. Nyarlathotep then unleashed its full power and manifested countless giant tentacles that tried to wrap itself around the skeleton king's body. However, before these black tentacles could even touch it, countless dragon breaths descended from the sky and incinerated them. Avernus and his dragon legion had come to support their master in battle. You know, I made Deus Gigantia with the intention of imitating Antero, Lux stated. But I realized that I can do something better. Avernus and the bone dragons all turned into particles of light and merged with Deus Gigantia. Suddenly, a powerful aura radiated from the skeleton king's body, sending powerful gusts of wind expanding outwards. The body of the skeleton king, which was as white marble, suddenly had a change. 4 pairs of draconic wings grew from its back. Its body was then covered from head to toe with a black armor that radiated a red aura. The draconic black helm with a crown on its head covered the skeleton king's face, and only its blue glowing eyes could be seen through its visor. Dragon patterns could also be seen on the armor, making it look more intimidating. Deus Gigantia was Lux's most powerful skill. Whenever he summoned it, a skeleton king which would always be 1 rank higher than Lux would appear to fight alongside him. Now that Lux was a supreme, his Deus Gigantia's strength rose to the peak of the demigod rank. But this wasn't its true power. Deus Gigantia wasn't indestructible like Antero, but it possessed an ability that the Golem of Destruction didn't have. It was the power to merge with all of Lux's subordinates, granting it a great boost in strength, making it break through ranks of a demigod, almost reaching the pseudo-god level. You said that you were invincible earlier, right? Lux said in disdain. Let's see if you can back up those words, you puny outer god. After saying those words, Deus Gigantia flapped its wings and instantly appeared in front of Nyarlathotep. With the raging flames of hell coating its fists, it unleashed a flurry of blows on the outer god's body. Earlier, Nyarlathotep stated that Lux was just tickling him. But what it didn't know was that the ticklish feeling that it was feeling earlier was actually Lux's blows directly attacking its soul. Because of this, Nyarlathotep's connection with C2 was being disrupted, making it feel a short lag in its reaction time. But now, with Lux raining blows on its body, Nyarlathotep finally discovered what Lux had done, making it scream in anger and frustration. The half-elf understood that Nyarlathotep's true body was in the abyss because James told him that it was impossible for an outer god to descend to a world that was under the control of an existing god. Although Ariel was in a weakened state, it would be impossible for Nyarlathotep to descend with a god's body in Elysium. Because of this, it took a chunk of its body and planted its consciousness in it. This consciousness was connected to its main body soul, which Lux was attacking directly from Elysium. Because an outer god's soul was extremely robust and powerful, the most the half-elf could do was make it feel ticklish. But this soul damage slowly increased with time, making Nyarlathotep finally realize what kind of danger it was in. No. Nyarlathotep forcefully tried to leave C2's body in an attempt to preserve its soul from being destroyed. But how could it possibly escape in front of someone who specialized in handling souls? From the start of the battle, Lux's goal was to completely destroy Nyarlathotep's soul that was still in the abyss. Daniel was already powerful enough, but with the outer god helping him, he was a force to be reckoned with. Because of this, Lux had decided that no matter what happened, he would fully destroy Nyarlathotep's soul, ending one of his strongest enemies in the battle for survival. Realizing that it was too late to escape, Nyarlathotep attacked with a frenzy and even burned a portion of its soul to further strengthen its body. The land under their feet shattered, and every blow that was exchanged was enough to instantly kill a demigod 3 times over. Even Lux felt the pressure of Nyarlathotep's desperate attempt to kill him. But he would not fall here. Diablo, Ishtar, Pazuzu, Asmodeus, and Orion, as well as their subordinates, merged with Deus Gigantia, giving it the strength it needed to match the outer god's strength. Lux's strongest trump card finally showed its strength as it covered its entire body in hellfire, making sure that its enemy would scream in pain and desperation. The half-elf was giving the outer god a painful lesson, which made it start to scream from inside its cocoon in the deepest layer of the abyss. Daniel had sensed a fluctuation from where Nyarlathotep's true body was currently located. Because of this, he hurried to the deepest layers of the abyss in order to see what was happening. Ever since the intruders had slipped through his net, Daniel had been in a very bad mood. Because of this, none of his subordinates dared to be even around him out of fear of being killed without even knowing how they died. In order to prevent the same thing from happening again, Daniel created waypoints all over the different layers of the abyss, allowing him to instantly teleport to the waypoint's location. Even before he had arrived at the location of Nyarlathotep's cocoon, he could already hear the outer god's screams, which made him wonder what was happening. "Stop!" Nyarlathotep shouted from within his cocoon. "I'll give you back the golden scales. I'll even help you fight Daniel. Just don't destroy my soul." Daniel's face turned grim upon hearing Nyarlathotep's desperate screams. He could tell that the outer god wasn't joking, and that it truly intended to betray him just to save its life. However, what concerned him the most was the fact that Nyarlathotep was begging someone to spare his life. Something like this shouldn't possibly happen, since Nyarlathotep's soul could instantly travel back to the abyss in order to return to his body. If the outer god was becoming desperate, it could only mean one thing. Its soul was unable to return to the abyss. Perhaps whoever it was fighting had done something to prevent the outer god's soul from returning to the abyss, forcing the latter to beg and ask for a compromise. However, after fully understanding what was happening, a sneer appeared on Daniel's face. "You act so high and mighty, thinking that all mortals are beneath you," Daniel stated as his hands ripped apart the cocoon that was protecting Nyarlathotep's body. "But in the face of death, you show your true colors. Looks like I overestimated you, Nyarlathotep." Daniel didn't know whom Nyarlathotep was fighting against, but he was certain that if the outer god were to fight using its real body, very few individuals could threaten its life. But since it couldn't bring its true body to Elysium, it had no choice but to use a weakened version of its body, further split into clones, so that it would be allowed to cross between the two worlds. Daniel then pressed his hand on the outer god's chest and began to extract the pillar of eternity that it possessed in Elysium. He would not allow anyone to get in his way, including his so-called ally, who planned to switch sides in order to save its life. "A Spore Frieden, if you let me go, I swear that I will fight Daniel for you," Nyarlathotep pleaded. "I am even willing to become your slave. We can have a contract between the two of us." Even Daniel didn't have the chance to sign a contract of equals with me. Lux ignored the outer god's pleading and focused on burning its soul with his divine abyssal flames. Although Nyarlathotep's offer was enticing, he didn't want to join hands with a being who treated mortals as if they were playthings. He would never make someone who tried to destroy the world tree and kill his lovers and ally. Using his power as the Necromancer of Heaven, he sealed Nyarlathotep's soul inside C2's body, incinerating it bit by bit with the hellish flames that covered his entire body. With every second that passed, Nyarlathotep knew that he was getting closer and closer to death, so he desperately begged and pleaded for forgiveness. Suddenly, the outer god cried out in pain, not because of the flames that were burning its soul, but due to the fact that someone was attacking its true body in the abyss. There was only one person who would dare do such a thing, and it made the outer god cry out in panic. The pillar of eternity that it possessed suddenly disappeared from its possession and was forcefully transferred to its real body in the abyss. "Daniel, you bastard!" Nyarlathotep shouted in fear, anger, and desperation. "How dare you?" The pillar of eternity was one of its bargaining chips to prevent Lux from destroying its soul. The outer god planned to threaten the half-elf that if it didn't release it, the pillar in its possession would be sent to the abyss, which might allow Daniel to finally bypass the 13th layer of the abyss. The outer god felt truly helpless and bitter because both its soul and real body were being attacked at the same time. Lux was dealing damage to its soul, while Daniel was desecrating its main body back in the abyss, forcefully stealing everything in its possession. "I curse both of you," Nyarlathotep shouted as its soul was nearing its breaking point. "I curse both of you to die together. May your soul burn in hell and cease to exist. I am Nyarlathotep. I am invincible. I am immortal. I can't die. I am God." Nyarlathotep roared in anger, unwillingness, and defiance. But that didn't change anything. Soon, its soul was finally extinguished by Lux's divine abyssal flames, which was one of the most powerful flames in existence. As soon as Lux succeeded, C2's body collapsed on the ground. He had only targeted the outer god's soul, so Aiko's most powerful summon was still alive and well. The millions of golden abominations stopped moving at the same time their master breathed its last. All of them then turned into ashes, and the black dome of light that encapsulated the kingdom of Aspur Frieden vanished without a trace. From within the abyss, Daniel roared in laughter as he held a golden scales in his hands. The pillar of eternity that Nyarlathotep had promised to give him after 2 weeks was now in his hands. However, the outer god didn't keep its promise, so Daniel had to forcefully take it, speeding up the demise of Nyarlathotep's soul in Elysium. Finally, Daniel looked at the golden scales in his hands, which still held a faint trace of Nyarlathotep's divinity. "The second pillar is in my hands." Lux, who had just finished fighting against the outer god, felt a chill run down his spine. He had tried to look for the pillar of eternity that should have appeared right after Nyarlathotep's soul was destroyed. However, no matter how much he looked, the golden scales was nowhere in sight. This gave him a very bad premonition. A bad premonition that had already become a reality in the abyss. As soon as the black barrier disappeared, a blue beam of light descended from the sky and headed straight toward the world tree. Aiko had felt that her connection with Iris was re-established, so she didn't hesitate to teleport instantly to her location. She had been flying as fast as she could in order to reach Aspur Frieden to save her mama from Nyarlathotep's cruelty. "Ma!" Aiko, who was still in her fairy princess form, appeared in front of Iris and immediately hugged her. A look of relief could be seen in her face as she held the young lady tightly. "It's fine, Aiko," Iris replied as she hugged back the little girl who was trembling in her arms. "We're safe. Your pa, Lux, came to save us." Aiko momentarily forgot her purpose for coming to Aspur Frieden. She had been so overwhelmed with the thought of wanting to find out if her mama was safe that she had completely forgotten about the outer god, who had planned to destroy the world tree. Aiko then glanced in the distance and saw a giant draconic knight, whose entire body was covered in black armor with dragon designs embedded in it. As if sensing her gaze, Deus Gigantia shifted its attention to the world tree. There, Lux saw all of his lovers at the base of the tree, including Aurora, safe and sound. He was happy that they were no longer in danger, but he couldn't rejoice due to the bad feeling that was rising up in his chest. Hirswith appeared in front of the Deus Gigantia, who was still in its dragon knight form. "Lux, did you find it?" Hirswith asked. Similar to Lux, she had also tried to look for the Pillar of Eternity, but her search didn't yield any results. "No," Lux replied as countless beams of light left Deus Gigantia's body. Avernus and his undead dragon legion once again soared through the skies, roaring cries of victory and making the survivors cheer because the monsters that had endangered their lives had all turned to ashes. But the happiness and relief didn't last for long. Soon, wails of sadness and heartache reverberated in the surroundings as everyone mourned for the loss of their loved ones. Lux and Hirswith sighed in their hearts, but they knew that they had already done the best that they could to minimize the number of casualties. Even so, the number of people who died numbered in the hundreds of thousands, which wasn't a small number. All the non-combatants had been gathered to stay in the kingdom of Aspur Frieden, knowing that it was the safest place in the world. Unfortunately, The outer god used this mentality to launch its devastating attack, killing many people who didn't have the strength to defend themselves from its vile clutches. "Leave the rest to me," Hearswith said as he nudged the half-elf in the direction of the world tree. "They are waiting for you there." Lux nodded as he exited the blue jewel on Deus Gigante's chest. The skeleton king then turned into particles of light as the half-elf flew towards the world tree to see his lovers. The moment he landed, Aurelia and Ari hugged him tightly, and both of them had tears in their eyes. When Nyarlathotep appeared, they thought that everything was over and that they would never get the chance to see him again. But when Lux suddenly appeared, they felt their worries disappear without a trace. They couldn't explain the feeling, but it was just what they experienced during their darkest and most desperate time. Iris, Kai, Valerie, and Ali looked at this scene with complicated looks on their faces. They didn't know what they should do at the moment and simply watched Aurelia and Ari cry their hearts out in Lux's embrace. Aurora didn't join her two sisters and simply held Valerie's hand. As someone very sensitive to life force, she had noticed that the dragon princess had a life growing inside her womb. This didn't come as too much of a surprise to her because she knew about Valerie's determination to give birth to Lux's child. She just didn't expect that the dragon princess would actually succeed. After confirming that Valerie was indeed pregnant, she immediately checked the bodies of her other sisters to see if they, too, were with child. It didn't take long for her to realize that Aurelia was also pregnant. Aurora felt a faint stirring of envy and jealousy in her heart because her two sisters had managed to get ahead of her. After seeing Dia, Aurora felt very attached to her and also wished to have a baby that was as cute and adorable as her. However, she knew that Lux wouldn't grant her request until Daniel's threat had been eliminated. Aurora agreed with her lover's mindset because she didn't want to give birth in a world that was under Daniel's rule. As the former goddess of Solais, she hated the pseudo-god with a vengeance. Unfortunately, her current self no longer had the strength to fight against him. The only one who could do that was Lux, who was now in possession of two pillars of eternity. Although Eiko still held the golden anchor, she would always fight by Lux's side, so the second pillar of eternity technically belonged to the half-elf. Only the golden candle remains, Aurora thought, the pillar that represents hope. Aurora already assumed that Daniel was in possession of two pillars of eternity because the one Nyarlathotep didn't appear when it died. With this, 4 pillars had already appeared in the world, with the location of the last one still unknown. Whoever managed to get it first would have the advantage. But in the end, this meant Daniel and Lux were fated to meet, for they both needed to complete the 5 pillars in order to reach their goals. For the time being, Aurora set these thoughts aside and looked at her lover. A faint smile even appeared on her lips. She didn't know how Lux would react once he discovered that aside from Jia, he would have 2 more babies in the future. Valerie was also looking at the handsome half-elf with a faint blush on her face. She had been told that the father of the child she was carrying was Lux, although this was the first time she was seeing the handsome half-elf. Perhaps sensing her gaze, Lux looked back at her with a smile on his face. This made Valerie's face turn a shade redder and her heartbeat to beat faster. Ali, on the other hand, who was also seeing Lux for the first time, had a strong urge to hug him. She didn't know where this feeling was coming from, but this was the first thing that came to her mind after the half-elf appeared in front of her. "Let's go inside the house first," Lux said after Aurelia, and Ari finally calmed down. "We have a lot of things to talk about." The 2 beautiful ladies in his arms nodded their heads at the same time. Now that the threat of Nyarlathotep was over, they would like to spend more time with Lux and be embraced by him once again.
Thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed today's episode. If you did, please like, share, and subscribe.